From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hello everyone, welcome to OpenLine on a Wednesday night. Look up here, we have a big panel, big group of people, and I think it's going to be an interesting discussion. We are going to be talking about an issue that a lot of people have been talking about in Nashville, the issue of tax incentives. We've had on the show people that very much support Nashville's use of tax incentives. Tonight, we have a group of people who have some concerns. I will represent from time to time those who support it wholeheartedly, but again, the group up here tonight has some concerns, and I want to hear from them as well. So let me introduce who we have with us. We have Doug Collier with the Service Employees International Union, the president. Doug, thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
Freda, also with SEIU, and former councilman and attorney, Mike Jameson. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Ben.
You recently wrote something in the Tennessean about this issue. So when we talk about this, the use of tax incentives, what some call corporate welfare, we've seen a lot of it. There's some who say our downtown is booming and it has never looked better, and that is great. What are your concerns on this issue? And I'll start with you, Doug.
Well, our concerns is it's a vicious cycle. Downtown is booming. The neighborhoods have suffered. My neighborhoods, I live in Davidson County, it's suffering. And the vicious cycle is that we give all this money and promote all this money to developers and builders. Workers are being laid off. City workers are being laid off. No money's in the general fund to be able to pay workers insurance or retirement. We hear that on a consistent basis. So having said that, all of those things, when you wrap them around as they come 360, it's a concern for all of our members.
And what did you say in your article, Mike, and what were your concerns?
In Mayor Purcell's second term, Nashville was nominated the best city for corporate relocations, and companies were already coming here in droves, and Mayor Purcell didn't offer a cent in tax incentives. That has changed, and I would hope downtown looks great now because we poured $1 billion into it, but we've done that at the expense of the priorities that local governments should focus on. I don't think there's anybody that's now telling you that police and firefighters are overpaid, or that our schools are palaces and don't need any improvements, or that our streets are in too good a condition, particularly if you've driven on I-440 lately. And there's a trade-off. Even if an incentive program works, every dollar that they're given, and they've been given $1 billion, every dollar that they're given is $1 less that we have for the actual needs that the city should focus on.
When they get a dollar, the theory is that it then generates other dollars, that by giving this tax break to allow or to encourage a development or encourage someone to locate here, it then means they do locate here, and that generates other taxes and other boats rise. What about that?
Well, I think what former council people have relayed to me is that the money spent in the TIF funds were originally intended and talked about going back into the general fund. Now, that, as we all know now, has not been the case. Therefore, the City Council has no control over those funds whatsoever. That's put in a separate fund out of their jurisdiction, and therefore have no ability to direct those funds anywhere else. So with that not going into the general fund, then the administration has taken position that we don't have the money to give raises, even in our up economy. We don't have money to pay our pension obligation, or we don't have money to pay what's now called the unfunded liability in our medical plan. So we find out why there's not money there, because it's all going to corporate America. That's the other reason we're giving for the outsourcing of city services. Like we were in 2010, that started the outsourcing of custodians. Is there not money in the general fund to be able to subsidize these positions without having to outsource them to private companies? Well, we find that all this money is costing the same thing or more to outsource these jobs. People are being laid off. Benefits, particularly pension benefits, have been eliminated. Health insurance has been all but eliminated because workers can't afford them. And then you create a system whereas the people are working some full-time jobs and part-time jobs all at the same time, and having to rely on the city for subsidies and their social programs. So we talk about those people saying, oh, that's bad for them to do that. But when you have someone that's working, and we're talking about people that work full-time, that's having to rely on government subsidies in order for them and their family to survive, that is bad, especially when we see these private companies that benefit from these tax breaks, the CEO making $40 million a year or $46 million a year. And this money going to out-of-state corporations in particular in Ohio and Michigan and Kentucky.
And now, Freda, SEIU obviously concerned about this. You put together a slideshow. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about the slideshow, what you've been doing with it, where you've been going, and the reaction.
So we've noticed with the community, people feel the growth of Nashville. It's been good, but also we have to think about long term when it shows infrastructure. And so what we've noticed, we see these monies coming out, people are seeing their tax properties being reassessed and avoiding the raise, the property taxes being raised. And so we put together the numbers. They feel the downtown growth, they see the gains, but they're not seeing it coming down to their own neighborhoods. And so we went out to neighborhood associations and ministers groups and community groups saying, this is what's going on for your taxpayer dollars. This is what's going on for property tax, this is where your sales tax is going, and this is the benefit we're doing to lure companies in, but the community's not getting their fair share out of it in their investment. And so we were going around and showing that what we're giving to corporations as they come to Nashville as part of the incentive packages, but also what's the other side of the cost. And that you may balance one part of a city department on one side, but it affects the overall budget at the end of the day, and also how it affects your property tax as it goes higher, and the cost of living is coming higher in Nashville. And so we want to put that in layman's terms so taxpayers can understand this is where your tax dollars are going. You have a right to know this, and this is the transparency that is not seen in our local government that we want to bring to light, to know this is your taxpayers' dollars. You have a right to say, and you have a right to hold your public officials accountable to your dollars. And this is what we see going, that it's not being articulated where the average taxpayer can understand.
Why do you think, Mike, as a former councilman, it's not being articulated in a way that it can be understood?
Because there's a culture behind corporate welfare, and there are teams of companies that work to gather these sorts of funds for their clients. So let me pick one example, and that was the MCC, the Convention Center. All of the mayoral candidates at the time campaigned for it, and when Mayor Dean was elected, it was no surprise that he was going to push for a convention center, and I understand that. But at some point we needed to have an open and honest and fair discussion. Is this a priority for the city? But the administration hired a company, one of the many that supports this sort of generation, called HVS, and their job was to assess the proposal and tell us if it was good for the city. And here's a number I'll never forget. They came out with this number that said we could expect 911,360 convention delegates. And that's a magic number because the delegate is a person who brings additional people with him. But 911,360, HVS tells us that's a phenomenal number. Your convention center is going to be a huge success. Go for this. So we start asking questions. Well, you've done this for other cities. Can we see those studies? They refused to show them to us. Said it was attorney-client privileged. So we contact the other cities that they've done it for. It's public record, they hand them out. And in each of these instances, in 12 cities that they'd evaluated the convention centers, the number of delegates predicted for Denver, for San Antonio, for Raleigh, for New Orleans was 911,360. So other than glue and some scissors, it was hard to understand what HVS had used to make this assessment. But we risked $500 million on that, and it's become this culture where one entity that's clearly hired to say what a proponent wants them to say funnels it into this. And now it's become self-perpetuating. So most recently we had Bridgestone that we just gave $66 million to. And when they were touting the property and sales tax benefits of Bridgestone staying in Nashville, not coming to Nashville, staying here, they were here already, we relied on the numbers that they provided. And in addition to the sales and property taxes that they were generating, keep in mind that those sales and property taxes don't go to us. They don't go to schools. They don't go to the general fund. Now they're within this tourism development zone that was created to fuel money into the convention center. So those monies perpetuate this, and the culture continues and continues, and we can't afford it anymore.
As far as Bridgestone, obviously the argument there is, well, if we didn't give them money, if Nashville didn't, then they would move. Now, they were here, but they were going to move buildings. If we didn't come up with some sort of package, then they would go to another city that would come up with some sort of package.
Right.
Do you believe that?
No. We spent, what, $52 million to keep them here and to keep a little over 1,000 jobs, 1,062. So we're spending about $52,000 per job per year to keep a company that's already here. At what point do we think they would have blinked? How far did we press that if we're just going to rely on their numbers? And I don't know that we have.
But it can be a dangerous game. If we were to lose them, I think that's why the council, so I guess what I'm getting at, why would the council vote for something that when you lay it out sounds so, you know, it sounds so unusual, but I think what is happening is, if you don't approve this, they're going to leave. And do you want that on your conscience?
Who's not going to say that? Do you think it's going to be a big surprise when the Titans tell us, if you don't build the next stadium, we're going to leave? I mean, this happens every day in ventures that are less and less profitable for cities. Yeah, it's a question of degree. Can this be a useful resource for cities? Absolutely. But it's not just us telling you that it's gone too far. Moody's and other credit rating agencies have downgraded Nashville's credit score based primarily on the corporate welfare that we're funding beyond control. And there are others than us telling you that we've gone a bit too far.
Okay, so we have to take a break. This kind of sets the table for the discussion. If you want to call, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. What do you think about this issue? We'll also come back and we'll start looking at, I guess, some of the slideshow that is being presented. We'll take a break, be back right after this.